Welcome to the MUFG Global Markets Podcast. I'm your host, George Patavis. Today I'm joined by Glenn Schultz, the head of Agency Mortgage Prepayment Modeling for MUFG. Today is Wednesday, September 13th.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for being on, Glenn, as always. So let's just get started by reviewing the August remittance data, which was released on Thursday, September 7th. The aggregate prepayments, as measured by Fannie Mae's 30-year cohort, reported a 6.7% month-over-month increase at 6 CPR, and the 15-year prepayment increased by 5.8%. Now, with spring and summer selling season prepayment behind us, what are your thoughts with respect to prepayments, and what does this summer prepayment movement tell us about the state of the agency market?
Yeah, sure. So August prepayment on month-over-month percentage basis underperformed the business day count, which was implied plus 15% month-over-month. But of course, that performance was against the headwind, of what seems to be a never-ending increase in the 30-year mortgage rate, right? So Freddie Mac's primary mortgage market survey closed the month at 722, close the month of August. So within our prepayment model, the blended mortgage rate closed the month at 6.9%, which is up about 15 basis points from the previous month. So, that's worth something like 1.5 CPR on the stack right now. So when you take those two together, aggregate prepayment was more or less in line with our prepayment model. Now, in terms of the state of the agency MBS market, I really believe that we're witnessing a return to the old normal with respect to prepayment speeds, and also for the basis for that matter, we've put out a couple of client notes along those lines. And by that, in terms of return to old normal, I mean that turnover in seasoning ramps are going to be more along the lines of the old PSA ramp, which was 0.2 to 6 CPR over a 30-month sort of horizon.
Thank you. And I think you also alluded to this in the monthly commentary. Will you address this quickly for us, for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So that if you look at August turnover, so this is opposed to the aggregate speeds, right? So we measure turnover by minus 50 to 0, sort of incentive, right? That turnover number came in at 8 CPR, right? And in my view, the spring summer selling season prepayment kind of confirms this return to the old normal with respect to seasoning ramps, turnovers, being more in line with the PSA ramp. So for a history, you can think about it, or I think about it, the early 2000s were characterized by speculative excess. We saw sort of seasoning ramps shorten and peak CPRs around 15%. And I refer to this as the flipper era, and it really started, it was started by sort of Greenspan's approach to the lower zero bound, came close to it in 2003 to fight deflationary pressure. There was a push on the government to, increase the home ownership rate, those types of things. And that's what I think induced the flipper era. Then the flipper era was followed by the great financial crisis, right? In which prepayment was near 0 CPR there for a while, and then speeds were brought up by multiple, HARP programs, those types of things. And then that was followed really by the onset of the pandemic, which was really kind of a whipsaw in terms of prepayment and turnover. So we saw prepayment or turnover dropping briefly to 0 CPR, and then spiking up and exceeding 15 CPR, as people sort of fled the cities out to the suburbs and beyond. So what seems to me to be, a structural shift in the 30-year mortgage rate, a shortage of single family homes, right, for sale, I feel that we're really witnessing this return to both longer and lower seasoning ramps. Now, that said, current production is more negatively convex than in the past. So, for example, in our model, the peak in the money CPR is now 60. In the past, peak model CPRs were more along the lines of the high 30s to the mid 40s, depending on the model. So it's a much more convex, negatively convex market than it had been in the past.
So in many ways, your kind of definition of the old normal really is with a new twist, and this is something that even I've observed in the macro data. Just that things haven't really gotten back to some sort of stability, and there's a lot of assumptions still that we're all making, and of course, who knows where we end up, and if mortgage rates stay at this level forever. And of course, the shortage of single-family homes, things could change depending on the economy. But I think your point's well taken. I guess let's maybe shift gears a little bit and turn the conversation to the actual basis and what's changed there and views on your front.
Yeah, so my view hasn't really changed fundamentally over, say, the summer months in terms of the basis. It closed Tuesday, the 12th, right? Right around 165 basis points, which is just at, kind of the 26-week moving average. And and when I look at the weekly charts, it's how I look at the basis. I use weekly high-low close charts. It really looks to me to be in sort of a consolidation phase at this level. And I still think the basis will close the year between 120 and 130. So we had revised up our target in the middle of the year from originally 100. And of course, our view on the basis is really driven by the impact of low net issuance in the Agency MBS market. And that's something that I think we're going to continue to see follow through into 2024. So I think when the market begins to kind of look at this low issuance number and starts baking that in for a longer period of time, I think that's going to drive the basis tighter.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And I guess obviously related to this is we need more demand returning to the mortgage product, and so that would also, of course, help and incorporate these views that you have and around the idea of the basis is cheap, but you need to have buyers step up. So I'm just wondering, given your view, what are your thoughts from yesterday's housing buyer opinion in terms of who's going to be the buyer of these mortgages?
Yeah. So I got a lot of questions on that yesterday, and fundamentally I disagree with the piece. So prior to the financial crisis, the Fed was never a buyer of MBS, and the basis traded in a much lower range. With respect to Fannie and Freddie, sure, the portfolios were reduced substantially, making them transactional, in nature more so than sort of arbitrage is what they were prior to that. So in my view, the demand side has not really changed substantially, and the reduction of the GSE portfolios has been underway for the better part of 13 years. So that's not really kind of a shock to the mortgage market at this point in time. And then also, again, going back, net supply is what really matters, and that this year is likely going to hit a multi-decade low. So I think there's a supply-demand dynamic here that is more favorable to the basis than maybe current market opinion makes out. But opinions make markets. So we'll see come the end of the year how things shake out.
Well, if it's any consolation, I'm in your camp, as you know. I mean, from an asset allocation standpoint, mortgages do look cheap, and if the factors that you've outlined continue to work out, hopefully we'll see some tightening ahead into year end, and it's definitely one of the better relative values out there in fixed income. On that note, let's wrap things up for this month's MUFG MBS Global Markets podcast. Rate, review, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and reach out to MUFG sales reps for any further information. Check back soon for more insights from the Global Markets Research Team.